I will firstly talk a little bit about tourism management, the journal, and then I will share with you a number of research, small projects. Actually, it's under one big umbrella project, but I will just briefly introduce the different components of that research under the agenda of resident sentiment. So talk about the journal, and I'm sure you recognize at least two faces. One is mine because I'm here, and then I'm sure you recognize Professor Sung-Won Park's face as well. So this is the organization of the journal, Tourism Management. We do have, in addition to myself and someone, we do have 3 other associate editors, or you call them regional editors. Professor Stephen Page is based in the UK. Professor John Kratz is based in the United States. And then Dr. Jingjing Yan is currently in Macau. So the 5 of us will look at all the submissions coming in. And usually Professor Park will do the first screening, do some test rejection, and then those who pass him will come to me, and I will review the papers and do a bit of more screening. Once it passed the initial screening, very likely the papers about Europe will go to Professor Page. The papers about Americas will go to Professor Kratz, and then the papers about the Greater China will go to Dr. Yan. And then the rest of the world, I will have to handle them myself. So for you, unfortunately, papers about Korea will come under me. So I will do the coordination in terms of review, revision, and then the final decision. So that's the setup of the Tourism Management Journal.
It's better than Sang-Won.
Really?
He's a harsh man.
Yeah, like him said, he complained to me, he only gets the authority to reject papers, but he doesn't have the authority to accept papers. So it's not a pleasant job for him, but he's very helpful. So in terms of the scope and position of tourism management, it is one of the leading journals for all those concerned with the management. So the focus is on management, including planning of travel and tourism. And we do take an interdisciplinary approach. In other words, we welcome papers that look at tourism, but also have theoretical underpinning, for example, in psychology, social psychology, computer science, or geography, economics. So and also lately we see some interdisciplinary research from the medical field, so which is good. We do encourage interdisciplinary research. And then as a journal, obviously all the papers published should contribute to theoretical and or methodological advancement. In other words, if it's a purely empirical study, if it's data-driven, then the paper is likely to be rejected. In addition to having specific implication for tourism management policy, obviously, all the research needs to be based on a real problem. Therefore, there should be specific implications. But as a scholarly journal, the papers do need to have theoretical methodological advancement. And like any other journal, I'm sure Annals and also JTR will welcome innovative topics. Look at something that we haven't looked at before, or take a different perspective to challenge some of the traditional thinking so that we can push the knowledge boundary of tourism management as a discipline. And as Professor Koo mentioned earlier, in terms of the impact factor, although it is not the only factor that we look at, but fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of people always talk about Ssci impact factor. And as you can see, the number continued to increase from 2014 up until the latest available number is 2020. And you see a significant jump between 2019 and 2020. That's not only for tourism management, that's for a number of different journals. And the reason is that I think they changed the formula in terms of calculation. Therefore, there are quite a few journals had a significant increase from 19 to 20, but with the 2021 number coming out, I think that will not be that significant difference. It will be interesting to see what happened now with the 2021 number. And some of the other indicators, different countries have different rankings. For example, the ABCD is Australian Business Council. They have their own rating of A+, A star A, and ABCD, those kind of ranking. And tourism management is rated as A star. And then the Chartered Association of Business School, that's UK-based business school, and also they do the rating of 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 being the highest, and they review that once, I believe 3-4 years, and to look at the numbers. So again, tourism management has been ranked or rated as 4 over the past 10-15 years or so. And then China has its own rating. It is an A, and then there are some other. These are available on all the journal websites if you're interested in looking at some of the other indices. And I'm not sure if you are aware of the Google H5 index. This is available if you do a Google search, it is available by discipline. So if we look at the business economics and management discipline, tourism management is actually the number 3 in all management related journals, behind American Economic Review and Journal of Business Research, but ahead of many of the mainstream management journals. H5 means that, for example, 118 means that 118 papers out of tourism management received 118 citations or more. So it is quite substantial comparing to other management journals, probably because more and more people now are doing tourism research. Therefore, the papers published in the tourism discipline get more citation comparing to, for example, if you look at technological forecasting and social change, probably not as many people doing research in that area. And that may be one of the reasons. In terms of the volume and issue, we have students who are quite young, so this is nothing new to you. This is the way it is. But only since 2 years ago, tourism management no longer has page numbers. So when you do your citation or you prepare your list of references, you may see a mix of, for example, if you cite something published in 2000, then you may have, if you follow the APA style, then you may have the volume number, issue number, and page number. But if you cite something published from 2020, then you will not be able to find that information, even if you follow the APA style. So the APA style will be a bit different now, the newest edition of APA style comparing to the previous edition. Each paper has a unique number instead of page numbers, and there is no longer issue number. So each issue, quote unquote, we publish is actually a volume. In the past, every year is a volume, and then within that volume, there is issue 1, issue 2, issue 3, issue 4. But now every time we publish something, that is called a volume. So now with the APA style, there is only that volume number and then the unique paper ID.
Cathy,
yes,
I have a question about this point.
Okay.
Which means, what does that mean that each page assign a number instead of page numbers?
Right.
I don't quite understand what that point out.
So because now most journals don't publish in hard copies, so there is no need for page 1, page 2. Every paper starts with page 1, right?
Okay, I see.
So each paper has a 5 or 6 digit unique number within that volume. So for example, your paper is published in 2022, then 2022 we have a volume number that could be 90, 91, 92, and within, for example, you have volume 90, and then you do a comma, and after that, it will be 3, 4, 5, 7, 8. That will be your unique paper number. And because of that, and also because now pretty much 99.9% of the journals or papers within tourism management, people read it online or download it from online. So as soon as a volume has sufficient numbers, then that volume is considered published. But before that is considered published, all the papers are already available online, and that will encourage early reading, early download, and early citation. So it takes about only 1 to 2 weeks from the time an author have an acceptance, receive the acceptance letter, to you have something online with the DOI. It only takes about 1 to 2 weeks. And then you wait probably 2 to 3 months for a volume to complete and to be considered formally published. But that doesn't really matter anymore because you get your DOI, you get your unique ID, then it is considered published by most institutions. So the time you received your acceptance letter, you will get a page proof within a week or 10 days. And once you return that, then it will be shown online, and that is considered published. We get about 1,800 submissions a year. That's a big number. That's actually down a little bit. In 2020, when everybody was at home, we got a bit more. But last year, I think people started going out, more social in a sense, less time at home, the number down by 150 or 200. So, but still, I think we're getting 1,800 a year. Because of the large number, we have to do a very stringent desk review. Probably only 25% of those actually pass the desk review. So managing editor, meaning Professor Sang-Won Park, he will reject probably 45% of the papers. I hope you don't have that experience. He rejects about 45%. And then he will pass on the rest to me, and I take another look and probably send out letter to authors to about 22% after the desk review, and then pass on to the associate editors. They can also do a desk review as well, and that counts for 8%. So altogether 75%. In other words, if you take 1,800 times 25%, that's the number of paper we send out to review. And each paper requires 3 reviewers, so that's still a lot of reviewers supporting tourism management to do the peer review process. If we don't do a very good job of desk review, very often the reviewer will come back and say, why didn't you desk reject that, right? You're wasting my time. And also it is difficult to find reviewers. They are all volunteers. So we have to manage the process very carefully. We understand authors get upset because they don't get the opportunity to be peer reviewed, but that's a balance that we have to.
Yeah, I have 3 times been killed last year. One paper in the within the 8% with associate editors.
Really?
Hopefully to be survived.
Okay, I'm sorry. Somebody said they have belonged to the 75%. Try it again, right? So what's new? Now, a lot of people say, okay, with the COVID, is there anything new? We've seen some papers coming in, try to redefine phenomenon. For example, we see papers now coming in, a lot of papers about skill development. Probably because people think the definitions now are different from pre-COVID. There could be new concepts as well. It could be old concept, but take on new meaning. Therefore, they think we need to have new measurement and also new relationships, right? So among the different constructs, there may be different relationships as well. Taking the area of consumer behavior as an example, for example, trust. The definition of trust today could be very different from the definition of trust 5 years ago. What does it mean by comfort? What does it mean by hospitality? Not only because of the COVID, but as you know very well, because of the smart technology. What does it mean by comfort, by hospitality, by trust, by choices? You know, all of those are different now with the bigger environment being very different. And when we look at resident behavior, again, what does it mean by crowded? now people are very conscious about crowds comparing to before COVID. And stereotypes. With the COVID, unfortunately, many countries have closed their borders and they're more conscious or even worried about international travelers going into their country. Would that change the stereotype? For example, in America, we've seen news reporting about Chinese or even to a bigger extent Asians being stereotyped because of the COVID, unfortunately. And that's related to sentiment. What do residents think or feel about seeing foreign tourists in their country or in their city? And then people are now more conscious about sustainability. Sustainability, including environmental sustainability and social sustainability. Social sustainability is not a new concept. However, it has not been investigated quite as much as environmental issues. Social sustainability, I think, within tourism, the carrying capacity concept has been discussed since the 1970s and 80s, although nobody has come up with a good way of calculating carrying capacity, but it is related to social sustainability. In other words, if we have too many tourists, that's beyond the carrying capacity, beyond the ability of a local community to accommodate a number of tourists, then that's not socially sustainable, right? And obviously, crisis and risk management now is a hot topic. We see quite a few more studies looking at crisis or risk management.
Here's one question.
Yes.
For you.
Okay.
Probably here a lot of our students have not much writing papers, not even submitting to the tourism management. But professors, including Namu Chang, we are well aware of, how to start off our research idea for targeting the tourism management. So new definition and consumer behavior, resident and crisis risk management is very good tips for me, actually. But however, still the tourism management and the tourism disciplines, we don't have our own unique theory yet. And a lot of things actually come from the business and come from the psychology, come from the other disciplines, which is very natural, actually. But what do you think about the impact factor is much higher than the general mainstream business journals? That means it's the impact factor. But how about the actual, influence?
To the society, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, definitely that's something more and more talked about. I don't know about in Korea. In Hong Kong, when we write grant proposals for government funding, we have to demonstrate the impact beyond academia. So actually in the grant proposal, we have to write something about creating impact. And we have to demonstrate how we will create impact by having a pathway to impact section, talking about how do we engage the community, engage the different stakeholders. And also for tourism management, the journal, all the papers required to have an impact statement. I understand in the past, and many journals now still require highlights. For example, bullet points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But for tourism management, we now require an impact statement. And in the author's guide, we specify impact statement is not about academic impact. It's about society impact. Mm-hmm. So hopefully we can get people to more think in that way. Mm-hmm. And also with the UK research assessment exercise, and also in Hong Kong following the UK system, now when the government comes and look at our research performance, the impact is really, really important. Yes, they want you to publish, but they want to know what's the impact. Has the government, for example, tourism department or economic development department, or for example, if UNWTO pick up your study and use that study as an example to help the industry, that's the kind of impact now people are talking about. So yeah, real life impact is more and more talked about, and I think will be more focused in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Now, in terms of the research trends, I mentioned earlier, we encourage multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and we do see more of that happening, which is good. That happened probably for a couple of different reasons. One, people in other disciplines are also interested in tourism as a phenomenon, especially now with COVID. The mass media has been talking about the impact, the devastating impact COVID has on tourism. Therefore, tourism become a phenomenon or register in a lot of people's mind, whether they are a psychologist or medical professional, or, so they become interested in tourism. And also because we encourage that, therefore, people from the tourism discipline like us, when we don't have a root discipline, for example, I'm not an economist, I'm not a psychiatrist, therefore I will want to borrow the expertise from other disciplines. So it both from the outside of the tourism and also from tourism researchers, we want to do more interdisciplinary research. So for tourism management as a journal, I do see a lot more author teams composing of people from different disciplines. We also see more multi-method research papers. And that is probably because of the technology now. Big data is becoming more and more obviously available, but more and more people are interested or feel like they need to use that as a way of triangulating, because the traditional survey method has a lot of limitations. And interestingly, we see a lot more experimental research nowadays. Actually, experimental research, again, has a lot of limitation because you have an experimental group and a control group, and you can only do 1 or 2 variables at a time. And there's so many variables that you are not looking at, you kind of exclude. So that has a lot of limitations. So it will be really, really good if one study can include multi-methods. So in a way, you take advantage of the strengths of different methods, and also you triangulate your results coming from whether it's interview, focus group, survey, experiment, big data, GIS, direct measurement. Again, we see that coming in for consumer behavior using neuroscience, for example, or eye tracking, or measuring perspiration, heart rate, body temperature to signal the behavior, right? Those are the direct measurements. So it is great to see multi-method research, but the point is thoughtful research, right? Yes, it's fine to have a lot of using big data as an example, whether it's online text or image analysis or GIS. Sometimes we see submissions with a lot of data, a lot of analysis, a lot of very beautiful pictures. However, it's not thoughtful. It's simply describing a phenomenon and then without answering the so what question. Going back to Professor Gu's question, real impact. What does that mean to tourism, right? Does it have any implication on policy? Does it have any implication? Do you provide any suggestion based on all the data and charts that you have in terms of tour operator management or destination management? So that's thoughtful. That's what I mean by thoughtful. We need to think through the process to design the research well. Great if you use multi-method, but don't use the method because it is cool. For example, a lot of studies follow the tours around using GIS, but then the question is, what can we do, right, with the data? So the research design needs to be very, very thoughtful. And we also encourage multi-study, actually tourism management in the author guide. We specify like tourism management prefers to publish papers based on multiple data sets. In other words, if it's a cross-sectional survey, basically we will send it back to the author because like I said, survey has a lot of limitations. If you don't use a random sample, or if you don't, if you cannot demonstrate this sample represent the population, then we really face the external validity issue. Whatever relationship that you find could be just because of this particular sample, right? So multi-study seems to be, the message seems to be out already. We see a lot of study coming in, a lot of papers coming in, doing study 1, study 2, study 3, sometimes 5 studies altogether. But the point is, it's more than just packaging. It's very easy to spot whether it's packaging because sometimes it's actually one study. You have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, then that's not study 1, study 2, study 3, right? For example, skill development. If you develop a skill from scratch, then obviously you need to start with a literature review. You need to do some interviews, for example, panel review and pilot tests and all that. It's just one study. It's not multi-study. So if it just package it as multi-study, then that's not the real intent of multi-study. The purpose is to enhance the findings' external validity. I think that is a big criticism from the industry, from real life, if you call it that. Yes, your study find that, but can I trust your study and put $1 million on this because your study find that? If you simply based on one cross-sectional survey, the answer is probably not, because if you survey another sample, you may get different results, right? So in order to do that, you can have impactful research. Yes.
Cathy, you're explaining now is very important, concept to us, but actually it's hard for even me to integrate study 1 enhanced to study 2, enhanced to study 3. I know that in order to publish a decent journal and tourism management, we have to make study 1, 2, 3 is, connect integration with meaningfully. It's very hard. But anyway, these days, since I developed a smart tourism and the keyword is very fancy, now is enhanced to a smart tourism city. And the Korean government tons of money investment for the title smart tourism cities, and then they're producing a lot of huge number of project and data, and then from that project result. But the researchers is hard to catch up that data driven into theoretically implications. That's the moment we are facing actually in Seoul. So this kind of the multidisciplinary is actually have a deeply and breadthly experience for going the good journal.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I face that issue as well. I'm still actively engaged in research as part of my job requirement. I still do research. And it is, I can hear what you're saying because of, for example, my personal skill limitation, then I have to go out to work with computer sciences or economists to do the data analysis. For example, if you want to do data, be part of the smart city whole funding area. But then at the same time, I think, like you said, a lot of data driven. How do I interpret the data? For me, my personal interest, then I have to work with, for example, people from psychology, social science to help me interpret. So using the theory coming from those disciplines to explain the data analyzed by computer scientists. So really, yeah, not only look at the data, that's the phenomenon, empirical results, but then I think we in a very good position to help the big data scientists to say, okay, explain the how and explain the why, explain the underlying mechanism, why does A lead to B, and how does it work? Yeah, it does take a lot of thinking and further investigation. Yeah. It is a challenge.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so any question about tourism management or general topic before I start sharing one of my research streams? Any question from students?
It's your good chance to connecting with the Cathy too. Don't hesitate.
This is your chance. Otherwise, you're gonna have to hear about my research. Could be boring.
Professor Cathy, I had a question. It's not really a question, but currently I'm working in a university in Vietnam, and we do some tourism research. And there's one time that we tried to submit a paper to your journal, and so that's why I said that we belong to 75% of that rejection. So
Okay.
yeah, so I think that I think we did a good job in terms of methodology and the study data analysis. But I would like to ask a question about like academic writing. Is that a big barrier, for example, in order to be considered for publication? Because we think it would be a good job for data analysis and the discovery study and the interest that belong to your channel. So I think how important is the academic writing to be accepted for a channel?
Well, I think academic writing is important, but it's not the most important. Usually we don't just reject a paper because there are some grammatical issues. I think probably the number one reason is theoretical contribution. You have to have a theoretical foundation and then theoretical contribution. I think that's if it's an empirical study, it's not a good fit. It's not that your paper is not good, it's not a good fit. You're probably too young to remember tourism management a few years ago, maybe 5, 6 years or 7 years ago, had a sister journal called Tourism Management Perspective, simply because a lot of the papers submitted to tourism management, we see value. However, it's more empirical in nature. Therefore, tourism management perspective was launched to provide an outlet for those papers. Those papers are good, but those papers are empirical in nature. Therefore, we transfer those to tourism management perspective. So for tourism management, the position of the journal is we want to see, it is a scholarly journal. Therefore, we want to see papers making theoretical contributions. So it could be a fit issue. Yeah. We do get a lot of paper that's very technical and they're all fine from as far as I can tell, but if it's not related to advancing the theoretical knowledge, then it's not a good fit. So don't take it as your paper is no good because you did a lot of work. It's just probably different journals have different positioning.
Yeah, thank you. We return in the future. Yep, hopefully.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, next. No. Oh.
Professor, I have a question.
Okay.
Yeah. As a student, I'm the PhD student. I know the importance of the running studying the multi-method. So we should study many methodologies such as big data or GIS or experiments, something like that. But these methodologies we should learn deeply these methodologies, and then we can use this methodology into my study. But so I learned many methodologies, but I'm not sure this is right way because we had a limitation to learning this methodology, but I'm not sure I don't know about the methodology deeply. So so I want to know this way. I mean the learning many methodologies is right way. So as a professor, I want to know this learning way is right. I mean, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sure. I think in the master's or PhD program, you get a survey of a lot of different methods, right? Within a course, 1 or 2 courses, you learn the basics of, for example, in-depth interview, focus group, Delphi and survey and big data and all that. That is good. That is the foundation, right? As you know, the best way to learn is by doing. So once you know all the methods a little bit, then if you can practice, for example, you do a research, then you use qualitative methods. For example, you combine interview with focus group. You do a small study. Then you get to really know the 2 methods well. So for every method that you learn, if you find that interesting, you don't have to do everything, right? Some people don't like qualitative study and they stay away from that, which is fine. But within survey, experiment, big data, that still is multi-method, right? Direct measurement and GIS, that's still multi-method. So when I say multi-method, it doesn't mean you have to know everything. We don't do everything, right? So you can pick, for example, a few that you think are really interesting and fit your skill. Some people are good with words. Some people are good with numbers, right? If you're not very good with words, then qualitative study will be very, very difficult. If you're not very good with numbers, then obviously if you want to do a various statistical analysis, that will be really, really difficult. Of course, you're welcome to challenge yourself to develop the skill, but at the beginning, you may want to pick something that you think, I can do it. I'm interested in it, I can do it. So you pick 1 or 2 or 3 and you practice. Learning in class gives you a survey of what it is. And then you get a sense of, do I like it? Do I not like it? Can I do it? So you can try out 1 or 2 methods in a study. That's how you learn. Even though your teacher tell you, you do interview, this is what you do data analysis for qualitative, you do coding and all that. Yeah, you learn it, but you don't really learn it until you do it. So you have to go through that process. So you just pick 1 or 2 or 3 and then do a little project and see if you really like it, that like you thought you did. And also when you say, oh, interview, everybody can do interview, but that's not true. You have to go out and do interview to find out, can you really get people talking to you? That's a skill, right? And doing interview also, do you take rejection well? You talk to people and people don't want to talk to you. Do you feel really bad? Some people feel really frustrated and say, no, I don't want to do interview anymore. But some people say, that's fine. If you don't talk to me, I'll talk to the next person, right? So it's really different. You have to find out what can you do, what do you enjoy, and you have to really practice. And doing it, it's just like, I don't know, what is your background, just like in undergraduate classes. You talk about food preparation, menu design, but you send the student to the lab so that they can do actually preparation and all that. That's practice. It's the same with research. You learn in the class and then you go out and do research. That's practice.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just do it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Professor, I have a question.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And for TM, there's a case study. So like selecting 1 region or 1 destination. So in this cases, like especially big data fields of study, it's I feel like it's a little bit difficult to generalize the concepts in a general concept. It's a little bit hard to generalize the results of the paper. So that in these cases, when you're accepting the paper, do you consider about these problems? So basically, it might be the result can be only the limited to the result of 1 reason, or it also can. So it's a little bit complicated to ask the question, but then my question is, in a case study, do you consider about those generalized issue, like when you're accepting the paper? Thank you.
Okay, actually, it's a good question. The differentiation between research article and case studies are not very clear, right? All the research actually happen in a special context. You have to collect your data somewhere. And that could be in Korea, that could be in America, that could be in Hong Kong. Are they case studies because I only collect data in one city? May not, depending on the other part, that theoretical part. If you're trying to develop a theory, prove a theory, and enhance a theory, and simply using data to support that, and multiple data sets, remember I said multiple data sets, right? To support that, then that's a research paper because the focus is on that theoretical part, right? If you're trying, I remember maybe last year we published a paper from Korea using an area that the authors developed a method to, now I can't remember the specific, I just remember I accepted the paper, I liked it very much, develop a measurement for an area so that the park or the attraction can manage the area very well and using that area as a case study. But the point is the authors want to develop, showcase that method. Developing a system to showcase that method is a new method. But we publish it as a case study because it's only being used. It's the first time the method was developed and it's only being used in that particular area, right? So it's not about proving a theory. It's just that the author would like to develop this method and to show that, yeah, this method really works in this particular context. So that was a case study. But all the articles actually have data from limited locations, but those are still articles because they were trying to, for example, enhance the social exchange theory, enhance, some kind of consumer psychology theory. That's fine. Then, yeah, you can collect data in Korea, for example, 2 different data sets in Korea, and try to enhance that theory. That's fine. So yeah, but the line is not clear, but I think the scope is a little different though, between the case study and a research article.
I have another question. Actually, it's a data-driven research is how to find out the suitable, theory, specific theory must to comply with that phenomenon produced by the data. So actually, the theoretical paper, we must get the causes of that phenomenon and then result.
Yeah, the causes, possible explanation, or you can challenge the theory. You can challenge the theory by saying that the theory, for example, I'm trying to think of some of the classics, like the Butler's tourism life cycle, or the allocentric, psychocentric, plug, or some of the old carrying capacity theory. They talk about it without empirical testing. And now you can say, here's the big data. Actually, the theory doesn't work here, right? And then you can say, how do you think the theory should be changed?
Yeah, right. So a lot of the philosophical, hypothetical argument and philosophical, premise is already existed a long time ago, since Greek period. But now we can be able to prove that theory by hypothetical, development with big data or small data, anyway, data.
Yeah. I mean, you can prove that the theory that we learn in the textbook are actually wrong. That will be a major development.
Yes, right. Okay.
All right. If there's no other question, we can move on, and you can always think about additional question, right? We can have another discussion at the end. Okay. So let me just share with you about what I've been doing in the past few years. Actually, it's a long string of research. I understand for students in your PhD program, you only have 3 years. It's not possible to do something like this, but obviously you're starting your research career, so you can think long-term, what do you want to do? And this also demonstrates that it does really take time for, we talk about impactful research. For research really to have real-life impact, it takes a long time. It's not like one small study can have a big impact, right? So I was interested in resident studies. We have been seeing tourist studies, and I want to look at residents. I'm sure when you study, you have studied resident attitudes, right? It's been researched since the 1970s because people talk about tourism impact. They want to attract tourists to the community, and then we've seen case studies as well of local residents complaining of having too many tourists and so forth. So the resident attitude study really started in the 1970s. The assumption is when residents has positive attitudes toward tourism and toward tourists, then they will support tourism development. When they support tourism development, then they will be friendly, hospitable friendly for the tourists, right? So that's the basic premises of studying resident attitude. I remember studies have looked at, for example, casino development in the community. What is the residents' attitude and the different forms of tourism development? So the key assumption is that attitude research is that attitude leads to behavior. And if you study any consumer behavior theories, you know that, for example, the theory of reason action, theory of planned behavior, they all say attitude leads to behavior intention leads to behavior. But is that really so? What is the predictive power of attitude to behavior? It has been uncertain since 20 years ago, and it is still uncertain. When you have a positive attitude towards something, do you mean you really gonna go out and buy it? Probably not. So the relations between attitude and behavior has always been assumed, but a lot of inconsistencies have been documented in the literature in terms of the predictive power of attitude to behavior. We wanted to look at resident sentiment. Instead of attitude, we want to look at a broader concept, and we use the term sentiment as an umbrella term to unifying or including as a substitute for a number of very general terms used in the literature. In the literature, we found people have used the term of perception, attitude, view, support, perspective, reaction, perceived impact. All of those we think is under the umbrella of sentiment. Sentiment is not only cognitive but affective as well. What do we think? What do we feel? You know, what is our perception? What is our view? So we use the term resident sentiment. I don't know if you remember this, that was before the COVID. A lot of the discussion was about over-tourism over the globe, right? A lot of the places like the Mediterranean area, this, for example, Barcelona, Venice, they were all saying that tourists kills the city, meaning residents really have negative sentiment about tourists and tourism. And in Hong Kong's context, we look at resident sentiment of mainland Chinese tourists because that's the #1 market, inbound market for Hong Kong, representing 78% of the inbound travelers. And mainland Chinese is a market that worth investigating because it is a surging market and it is the dominant tourist market for Korea, Thailand, Japan, Russia, Vietnam, and United Kingdom before COVID, right? So looking at the resident sentiment could help understand the tourist-host interaction and hopefully facilitate the sustainable development of tourism. Here, sustainability, I mean the social sustainability. So that's the reason we wanted to look at Hong Kong resident and mainland Chinese tourists. And this is just to show you the number of tourist arrival. The top line is the total arrival. And the bottom line, the red line, is from mainland China. As you can see, 2018, before the COVID. Well, 2019 decreased a little bit because of the social unrest in Hong Kong. For the second half of the 2019, the number of tourists decreased already, and obviously 2020 went down by 99%. So our study actually started in 2016. Why? Because that's the time when over-tourism started to appear, and also there were some conflicts between Hong Kong residents and mainland Chinese tourists. As you can see, 78%, almost 80% of the tourist arrivals to Hong Kong are from mainland. And we've seen protests, for example, in Hong Kong, saying that we shouldn't allow mainland travelers to come to Hong Kong individually. There were some confrontation on the streets in shopping mall between local residents and tourists. So that was quite a serious issue, not only impacting the quality of life of Hong Kong residents, but also from the tourist perspective, that could damage the reputation of Hong Kong as a travel destination. If tourists perceiving having confrontation with residents when you go to a destination, then probably you don't want to go. So that would be damaging to the destination city, right? So there were a lot of situations like this that local residents are simply saying there are too many tourists. So social effects brought by tourism, obviously there is culture conflict, different culture, different background, different value, different way of expression that could cause conflict. Excessive use of public resources, streets, traffic, noise, trash, okay, all of those are use of public resources and therefore disturbing the way of life for local residents, right? So those are the potential. And when we look at social sustainability and social impact, according to the literature, requires the significant efforts to balance the costs and benefits to the local community, right? So the literature have shown some positive impacts and some negative impact. I mentioned about traffic and individual crimes, petty crimes, or organized crime, drugs, alcohol, and positive impact, obviously economic related. Employment, income, standard of living, tax revenue, therefore it can increase the quality of life in terms of availability of resources and so forth, right? So social sustainability is really a big issue. However, most of the studies have been looking at tourists. What do tourists think when they travel to a destination, rather than looking at what do residents think? And social impact seems to receive less attention than environmental. When we talk about sustainable tourism, very often a large part of the study is looking at environmental, ecological sustainability rather than social sustainability. So we want to look at host-guest interaction. That was the first model that we proposed. We look at, talk about theoretical underpinning. We look at the literature. Some studies use social exchange theory. Other studies use social representation theory. Social exchange theory is more on the individual level, and social representation is more on the community level, right? So this is the resident sentiment. Our sentiment, how do we feel, how do we see things, is influenced by our personal experience, influenced by our interaction with our friends, family, colleagues, and tourists, and also the destination characteristics. For example, in Hong Kong, geographically, it's very small. With that many tourists coming in every day, it's very crowded, right? So that's going to influence the resident sentiment. Sentiment will influence behavior. Behavior could include, how do I interact with tourists? Do I want to interact with tourists? Do I want to be friendly to the tourists? How do I interact with friends and family? Do I complain about tourism with friends? And do I want to support tourism development? So that's the sentiment. That's on the individual level, but at the community level, there is that public sentiment. public sentiment could be influenced by the economic, social, cultural, political environment, and that will have an influence on the individual. If the whole society is very, very against tourism development, that will have an influence on the individual, right? So this is the overall model that we propose. Then for resident sentiment at the individual level, then we use qualitative, quantitative methods. For the public sentiment, we use text mining to look at society as a whole. What is the phenomenon in terms of public sentiment, right? So I won't go into the detail, but the qualitative study is published in Tourism Management. That was 2018. We started the study in 2016. So the first paper published was in 2018. And we found that based on qualitative studies for Hong Kong residents, we did longitudinal comparison and also upward downward comparison. So Hong Kong residents feel like we are superior economically. However, feeling of superiority, we compare longitudinal. In the past, Hong Kong residents feel like, oh, in the past we're richer, now we are poor. So in the past we're very superior in terms of economic situation, but now Hong Kong residents still feel they are superior comparing to the mainland tourists because we're better educated, we're more experienced, we're more international. So it's more on a social cultural perspective. So that feeling of superiority has a range of economic versus social cultural. However, at the same time, Hong Kong residents feel deprived. They feel deprived of space, they feel deprived of resources because a lot of the tourists coming in buying a lot of everything. Therefore, Hong Kong residents feel like, okay, tourists bought everything, now we don't have anything, right? So it's that relative deprivation. So that's based on the qualitative study. And then the second stage, we published this paper in Journal of Travel Research, is based on the quantitative study using survey and structured equation modeling. So resident sentiment, actually as a concept, we identify 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 components, including attitude, cognitive, and then also affective, and then identification or personal identification, meaning do I think they are like us or do I think they're very different from us, right? And the two things I mentioned, superiority and deprivation. So these are the resident sentiment and have an influence on behavioral responses and support for tourism development. So that's from the quantitative survey part that we published.
Okay, Cathy.
Yes.
This is very interesting papers. Now is you said longitudinal. Now is this world is changing due to the COVID-19, and I think Hong Kong is very struggling to tourism industry because of the COVID. Mm-hmm. Probably the sentiment would be change abruptly in terms of economic perspective.
Yes.
So what are your projection? Do you think sentiment is changing from the negative to the positive or whatever?
I think yes, in the short term. I think it comes in a circle. That's my prediction. It could be very wrong. That's my prediction. I think in the short term and historically, I can show you some numbers when we do the big data analysis. Historically, when the economy is not good, the sentiment is positive. When the economy becomes better, the sentiment becomes negative. So residents actually have a short memory of what is good, what is not good.
And another variable we can be able to consider actually since the few years back to few years as Chinese government reinforced much their governance style into Hong Kong. Probably Hong Kong residents is feel not good toward mainland China, their government policy toward Hong Kong. So what do you think? I think it's a possible potential influence to the people's feeling.
It could be, and that's our next step. We want to do a real-time monitoring. That's why we now doing trying to do real-time monitoring. But what you said could go either way. We don't know. We have to let the data tell us. You said some people may not be happy about the policy. That's true, but we don't know what percentage of people are not happy. And with the changing of curriculum for school, the younger people will have more of a sense of patriotism, and they could be very happy. We don't know, right? So we will let the data tell us what people think. Yeah, but those are very good points. So for that particular study, we look at public sentiment as well using big data. We did news sentiment analysis, and based on agenda setting theory, basically there is a strong correlation between what we see in the mass media and what we think, right? So we don't know. And then in the agenda setting theory, there's that bi-directional relation. Some people say the media influence the people, but then sometimes people will say the media will tell stories that people are interested in. So it could be two-way influence. But anyway, we want to look at the news sentiment. What's the sentiment expressed in the news media? And why do we use media? Because Hong Kong relatively, we look at 2003 to 2015-16, enjoyed a very highly developed media environment. There are lots of newspapers, there are lots of mass media available. And therefore, the local and also the local tourist interaction very often become the headline on the mass media reporting. So lots of information was available. So we want to look at the sentiment in terms of positive or negative. So 2003 to 2015, 19 Chinese language newspapers. We ended up with 70,000 articles. We randomly selected 1,000 news articles and we manually coded them. We asked 2 of our students actually read through each article and then do the coding and compare inter-rater reliability. And this is used to train the data analytics, right? Using meta learning. So then we asked use the meta learning to code the rest of the 70,000 articles into resident sentiment index. So just a bit of results. The average sentiment, as you can see, went down and then went up and then went down. And the orange line is the tourist arrival. So as you can see, at least since 2009, when tourist arrival suddenly they increased, the sentiment decreased dramatically. Earlier, 2005, we saw the sentiment decrease a little, and then that was the also increasing trend of the sentiment. And I can show you some events that are happening. Again, the bars are the arrival, and then the blue line is the sentiment. 2003 was the year Hong Kong opened the individual visit scheme. In other words, mainland tourists can come to Hong Kong individually. Before 2003, they had to come in a tour group. So because that opened up the individual visit, the number of tourist arrival increased. And the sentiment was quite high because if you remember, that was the year of the SARS. The economy was not good. So the sentiment was quite high. However, as the number of visitors increased, the sentiment decreased because of the crowd, because of other social impact, particularly low when the scheme, individual visit scheme, was expanded. Initially, it was only for a few cities and then expanded to many, many different cities, right? And therefore, people seeing, wow, maybe the number of arrival will further increase. And when that, and also then when you look at 2007, there was a sudden increase of sentiment, probably, again, going back to the agenda setting theory, whatever you read on the media will have an influence on your view, right? And that was the 10th anniversary of Hong Kong return to China. A lot of positive reporting about Hong Kong being part of China, it's doing very well economically, you know, all the positive news, therefore the sentiment went up. And then as the number of tourists increased, sentiment went down a little bit. So it went up and down, but it's quite correlated with major events. There is the top point is the Hong Kong government issued multiple permits. For example, in the past, they can come in once with one permit, but multiple permit means once they get a permit, they can come in as many times as they want. And that, again, triggered that fear that, well, we're going to have lots of tourists coming in. So that sentiment went down. And then as you can see, the correlation between the tourist arrival and the sentiment. So yes, so the sentiment is correlated with news reporting and also events happening in the society, right? And we look at the density of the population with the sentiment. There's sort of correlation as well. As the density went up, the sentiment went down. And this is the unemployment rate. As the unemployment rate decreased, the sentiment went up, meaning when the economy is good, people are happy, therefore they don't mind as much when we have a lot of tourists, right? So that's why when you ask the question, what about post-COVID? I think right after post-COVID, when the economy is so bad, we welcome tourists to come in. So sentiment will be very high, but it will be interesting to see how long that positive sentiment can last. But then people would say, what about newspapers have their own agenda, right? Some newspapers are on the right wing of the politics, some newspaper on the left wing of the politics. But as you can see, we separate the newspaper by category, but yeah, they are different, but the movement are similar. Right? Their starting point is different, but the movement is similar. Okay? So
interesting. The leftist
yeah.
previous slide.
Yeah.
The leftist the media is higher than the rightist.
That's right. The leftist, meaning they're pro-China, meaning, you know, so they're more positive about mainland tourists coming to Hong Kong.
So they're more ethnically integration, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They're pro policy.
Pro policy.
Yeah.
The rightist is kind of independent Hong Kong.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I see. Yeah.
Okay, so these are the two papers that we published in JTR about the meta-learning and then the news media sentiment analytics, right? So if you're interested. So the conclusion is simply having tourist host contact cannot reduce prejudice or stereotype, because as you can see, a lot of tourists coming in, a lot of contact, but still residents don't like them. So simply having a lot of tourists, a lot of contact, doesn't mean that, oh, we'll gradually learn from each other, we'll like each other, we'll be friendly residents and everybody will be happy. No, we have to work and try to encourage both parts to learn, to do their job. From the tourists, for the tourists, obviously they need to respect the local culture. They need to be civilized in their behavior. For example, you don't put trash on the floor, you have to queue up for, you know, stay in line, and you have to ask questions politely. And so be aware of culture differences and compliance with local norms and customs, right? When you are in norm, you do what Norman do, right? So you have to respect the local culture. But from the host perspective, we really need to prepare Hong Kong residents in this case to understand that for any group of people, there are a variety, right? It doesn't matter which country tourists, they're good tourists, they're not so good tourists, right? You cannot say, oh, I see one tourist who behave badly, therefore everybody from that country is not good. So They need to understand people are different and therefore try to change their own beliefs and stereotype. Very often stereotype is hard to change. Stereotype meaning I'm lazy, I don't want to think. When I see American, I think they're this way. When I see a French, I think they're this way, rather than seeing individual as individual. So we need to educate both the tourists and the local residents in preparing for a better, more socially sustainable tourism development. So what are we doing now? We want to construct a multi-perspective social listening platform. We want to listen to different stakeholders because support from stakeholders collectively determine the success of sustainable tourism development, right? So we want to do real-time observation because sentiment can change, like Professor Koo mentioned earlier. When the economy is good, or when there are too many tourists, or when there's no new policy in place, everything could change. So we want to do real-time observation rather than doing that for one time. For example, we did the 2003 to 2015. Obviously, things are different. If we can build a system, automatic system to do real-time monitoring, then strategy could be better tuned to take advantage of the sentiment and try to change the sentiment. Now, in addition to sentiment, I know there's a lot of information, but let me talk you through. In addition to sentiment, we want to find out the causes of sentiment. And we bring up a different concept. We call it ambivalence. Sentiment could be positive or negative. I like you, I don't like you, right? But actually, in our mind, we could like something about you and we don't like the other things about you. So we could feel positive and negative at the same time, rather than either positive or negative, right? So when we have something positive and negative at the same time, it is called ambivalence. And we want to look at a triadic balance. Triadic balance means residents, tourists, and tourism development. Tourism development as policy, tourism development as phenomenon. So we want to look at the three sides or the three perspectives. How do they look at each other, right? If we like tourists, tourists don't like us, then what can we do with policy? If we like the policy, but we don't like the tourists, then what can we do, right? So we really need to look at three sides. So we want to look at the stakeholders' disposition towards each other and toward tourism. Disposition is people's psychological or natural tendency to think, to feel, to behave when something or someone happen in a given emotional context. All the tourist host contact are actually quite emotional, okay? When we see a tourist, we're happy. When we see a tourist, we're sad. When we see a tourist, we're angry. When we see a tourist, we're excited, right? All of those are emotional contact. So we want to find out the different stakeholders' disposition or their psychological states when we meet someone, right? So how do we do that? We do social media, big data, and we do survey data. Social media, big data, we will look at residents and tourists, but for the policy and the industry practices, we do survey data. And hopefully based on this, we will understand and we can predict people's views, emotions, and behaviors, then we will have a decision model developed, right? So that's what we're working on currently. You're the first group I present this to, so.
Good. I'll copy this idea to
we have
our current contact.
We have collected all the social media already, and we're trying to, and the previous project, we have trained the machine to do the sentiment. And now we are in the stage of analyzing the data and trying to calculate the ambivalence. And hopefully once we get this ready, then we need to hire a programmer to establish the social learning platform. So we want to listen to tourists, listen to hosts. We want to listen to organization through media data, including social media. In the past, we only look at news data, but this time we want to look at media and social data.
Okay.
we have the 2015 data available in the past, news media. So we have collected the social media, probably not from 2003, that was probably before social media, but we want to collect all the data available to do the sentiment analysis, to do some modeling. And we still need to do interviews with DMO and survey. And then we will calculate, do the model, and eventually build a cloud social listening development platform so that the platform can do real-time monitoring of the data and then provide, of course, human need to interpret the data and provide policy suggestions. So that's what we're doing. And this part of the project is funded by Hong Kong government's public policy funding, because the government sees this has implication for public policy. So we're doing that. So the Hong Kong government is funding the Hong Kong part, and then the next part is to expand that into to southern China, the Greater Bay Area, the southern part of China, including Hong Kong, Macau, and to again be the next step to test the model, to test the platform. So it is a long process. By the time we finish, it will probably 2-3 years from now. As you can see, we started in 2016, so almost a 10-year project. I'm not trying to scare the PhD students here, but it is a long process, and we can only do one step at a time. So
wow, it's quite impressive the research result and how connected actually government policy is actually valuable, very valuable research and outcomes. And how about the psychological statement? I think Hong Kong is mainly industry from tourism. So psychologically, they are pro to tourism policy, but individual level, I don't, walking on the street, I'm bumping into the people with the tourist. I don't like the people many come to Hong Kong street. So, the psychologically is emotionally or cognitively would be different from policy based and the individual life based.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, that's why the sentiment, within the sentiment construct, we identify the cognitive and affective. Those two could be quite different. Cognitively, I think it's good. It's good for the job and the economy, but affectively, I don't like it. For example, if there are too many tourists, and that's why we need to so it's a balance, right? And we need to monitor that in real time to see if it's over a threshold. Maybe the government should tone down or be more selective or target market differently of different segments of tourists. So with I think you've been doing smart tourism, and this is part of the smart city. Hopefully we can do better policy adjustment based on real-time big data.
And another one is even though I am a resident of Hong Kong at this moment, but somehow they changing their status to the tourist if they go out of the Hong Kong. So the people cannot sustain one position, and they have to change another one because they become a tourist in a certain place.
Yeah.
So what do you think of that kind of stuff?
I think that came out a little bit, but not very strongly when we did the interview. People would say, how come they behave this way? When I go out travel, I don't do that. So they kind of do that comparison. Like you said, they changed their status. But it will be really interesting because I don't know if you understand the geography of the bigger the Greater Bay Area of Hong Kong, Macau, and then the Guangdong province. That's now the central government is trying to develop that Greater Bay Area, just like San Francisco Bay or many of the other Bay Area in the world. So it's a big geographic area and it's a huge economic area. And it will be really interesting as more people travel within that Bay Area, how do they change their perception? As socially more integrated Right? More Hong Kong people will go there and do their business, for employment. They're talking about 1 day travel area. So as that become more integrated, and you change from being a host to a guest within 10 minutes, crossing the border, that will be really, really interesting, I think, to see how psychologically people switch on and off and change their role.
Like another question is like your dyadic relationship with Chinese people, one ethnic group, but you are different political situation in a long-term period. But anyway, you are the same people and the dyadic relationships, particularly comparing to Korea and Hong Kong. So probably sentiment analysis toward tourist, where they come from originally, they're very different.
Oh yeah, that's we published a paper on that actually.
Oh really?
I think it's in JTR as well last year. Because when we did the interview, that's a side paper that we did because it came out of the interview. Actually, we interviewed Hong Kong residents for the first part of the project, and they voluntarily told us that when you compare them, meaning men and Chinese, with Korean, with Japanese, with Taiwanese, with older people, with European, so they make that comparison, which trigger us to do a grouping of people and our survey. It's really, really interesting. For example, they will group senior, and not only by nationality, but also by age as well. So they will say, for example, senior travelers from Korea, Japan, they group that in one group. Younger people from, I can't remember the exact, but they will group younger travelers from, for example, Japan, Taiwan together. And they will group, so they will group and they will characterize them differently from group to group.
Very good. Thank you very much. This is my whole question. Hey, students, your chance.
Professor?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you for a great presentation, Professor. I have a question regarding the research topic in the perspective of residents. As you mentioned, overall tourism has been a research topic in tourism sector for long times, but after COVID-19, tourist behaviors have changed a lot, especially in Korea. Many tourists seek like camping without crowded people and travel to minimize interaction with other tourists or residents. So could you share some opinion on what new topic there will be for tourism research from the perspective of residents after a pandemic?
Wow, projection.
What you mentioned actually happened in China as well. I did a seminar not long ago at a conference. They asked me to talk about China tourism. Actually, one thing that now very popular in China is glamping, luxury camping. I don't know if that's the situation in Korea as well. People want to stay away from the crowd. And another thing that we see is the spending. People are now more willing to spend on luxury travel. I probably shouldn't give you any topic because I'm biased. I'm more biased toward understanding why from a psychology perspective, but I'm sure you can find other interesting topic depending on your discipline, depending on the discipline you're interested in, whether you're interested in economics or geography or the different. It could be very, very interesting though. I think the changes, but just like I mentioned earlier, you're just at the beginning, so probably you shouldn't think of one-off. I understand you can do one-off study for your thesis or dissertation, but try to think long-term. After this, what can you do as a follow-up, right? So have a longer perspective. Longitudinal study definitely is lacking in the tourism discipline. Why? Because it's difficult. It is difficult, but it has value because things change. And if every time we do cross-sectional, we cannot compare because you use different instrument, you use different measurement methods, you use different population, so cannot compare. However, if you can do longitudinal, you can do tracking, that will be really, really helpful. And that will really contribute to the knowledge development.
Yes, thank you.
We have colleagues interested in the economic area. They look at things very differently from the way I look at things. They always look at modeling and willingness to pay and what influenced their purchase decision in terms of dollars. So that's why I say I cannot give you specific topic recommendation. It all depends on what discipline you're interested in.
Yeah. We are all biased. We
Yeah,
are all
of
biased
course.
people.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what we need, their subject. Okay, no question? Let me ask. I have a lot of plenty of questions. As you know, question is important.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. You're the senior professor of long-term senior professor of this tourism field. I know you have a lot of education experience, but the students every single year, every single semester coming in, you know, as a fresh, you know, fresh method, fresh mind, fresh, you know. Anyway, you have to educate them from the scratch and from the bottom line. And so how the starting point is educate them or discipline, train them since, you know, they come in to you?
Well, you pick the good students first, right? I'm sure all the students
That's
you
right.
picked are very good already. So you have a good starting point. And actually, we are quite impressed by the student coming out of Kyunghee University. We have a few faculty members, a few of my colleagues actually came from Kyunghee University. So you must be doing something right, right?
Someone.
Yeah. So I guess, yeah, picking the right student. I don't really, every professor has a different style. Even in our school, every year we do a seminar to tell the student how to work with professors, but every professor tells them something different. Some professors will say, come and talk to me every week. And some professors say, don't come and talk to me unless you have something to show me or you have a question.
Okay.
So I guess it all depends, but I think the burden is on the students. It's not on the professors. Professors cannot teach you things you're not interested in learning, unfortunately. So I will give pressure to the students, up to you to learn. Whatever you want to learn, I'm sure the professors are very willing to teach you, but we don't know what to teach you until we know what you're interested in learning. Of course, we can do the basics, right? Just like one of the students mentioned, I think it was Hiran mentioned that you learn the basics of everything. That's what we can do, but it's up to you to pick up from that everything. What do you really want to know? And then you more proactively approaching the professor to say, hey, can I know a little bit more? Then that's where we come in.
Okay, vice versa is, you know, like when you said the professor, there's no such a, you know, negative part or, you know, but students, it's totally up to students, you know, life for the future. When they choose their advisors, what advisors, you know, how they educate them or teach them, is their life is probably very different result in terms of the research context and in terms of becoming professors. So what is your advice to them to work with professors, a different style of professors, or anyway?
So do they get to pick professors, or do
we give it a chance to the students? It's totally up to the students. You know, they can choose the professors, their advisors. But here in Korea, probably Hong Kong is similar. They are shy and hesitate even they don't want to change in forever, whatever. It's a very different style from America. But still, I'm keep telling the students, it's your life and it's your chance.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. If you get a chance to pick, you're lucky, because our students don't. We assign them.
Oh, really? Or sign?
Because we have to consider professors' workload, right? We don't want one professor to have 10 students and the other has none.
Wow.
So we try the best we can to match the students, and we put a limit on the number of students a professor can supervise. For example, once I reach that limit, even if you're very interested, I cannot take you. So selecting a supervisor, obviously depending on the topic, what you're interested in, but if you're not sure what topic you don't have a fixed topic yet, you're very open, then I would say you choose a professor by style. Who do you think you can work with? And that's really, really important, the match in terms of working style and personality. That's really, really important. The worst you can do is to pick a famous professor. I mean, you don't pick a professor because that professor is famous, right? That's not a good reason. I very often tell our students, actually, younger supervisors, they're very energetic. They have the most updated knowledge. They just graduated from their PhD program. They know the best, the most updated of everything, right? Whereas you pick an old professor like me, I haven't been to school and learned new things for many, many years. What I know may be outdated already, right? So don't pick somebody because he or she is famous. That's not the right way to go, right? Style, I think working style is really important.
Before they choose, they don't know their working style.
Well, you talk to other students, I'm sure the words get around. We all have our reputation. Our reputation may be on the social media already. The students have their own group on social media. I'm sure they talk about professors.
Yes, that's what I'm talking.
And you go talk to the professor personally. When the student come and talk to me, I say, you go out and talk to other people as well, do your shopping.
Shopping.
You don't buy you don't buy something the first time you look at it, right? You do your shopping. It is important.
That's right. Really important advice, shopping. Shopping professor, your advisor. Okay. And any questions from
Professor, I have a question.
Okay.
First of all, thank you for your great lecture. The resident sentiment concept is really interesting to me. I have a question in the analysis part of social media. I think when people post their own thoughts on social media, I guess people are likely to post more negative comments than positive ones. Because they want to express their own expression in social media. So if it is right, there will be some bias in sentiment analysis or topic modeling. So I want to ask that if you consider this issue, and if this situation is true, how do you determine the available data for analysis?
Yeah, that's a really good point. The counter argument, it is true. And the counter argument though is, it doesn't matter if it's you're exaggerating, but your social media influence other people's view. So if you're only on a scale of 1 to 10, a 6, and you say something more like a 9, your friend is influenced by that 9, it's not influenced by that 6. So your view influence other people, and that's why people get really, really excited about something, actually out of nothing, right? But that's the public sentiment as a group, society sentiment. And very often, and that's why people say social media is evil, because you exaggerate things, but that's the phenomenon. We're presenting the phenomenon.
Good. Any other?
I have a question. Thank you for the great presentation. I think the resident statement is like sentiment is like quite crucial concept that opened my eyes, because I only saw the part of the good things about the tourism, and then this is about how people live, and it has a really great impact on everyday lives. But I have a quite personal question, if I may.
Sure.
Yeah. What was the moment you decided to settle on the tourist behavior, like how people react in tourism? Because there's a lot of area in the tourism, and because as a student, I see a lot of researchers and professors who got their own specialties and their own area and research style. And I want to get an expertise someday like you. So I was wondering, like, if there was a certain moment you realize, oh, this is what I have to do as the rest of my life or something.
Okay, I think you're talking about that moment. Why do I want to do this, right? I think you just need to keep your eyes open, keep your ears open. That moment will come to you. We were talking about shopping for professors, right? Actually, this idea came to me when I was shopping. Everything goes back to shopping. When I was shopping, I feel like, why does, because I look Chinese, right? And when I go to a shop in Hong Kong, if I speak English, I get one treatment. And I can speak a little bit of Cantonese, that's the local language, right? So for the first 2 minutes, if they think I'm a local Hong Kong, they treat me differently. And if I speak in Mandarin, I'm from Taiwan originally, if I speak in Mandarin, and they will spot my Mandarin being different from mainland Chinese Mandarin, and they will say, oh, you're from Taiwan. I say, yes. And they will treat me differently.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, I have multiple identities. I get different treatments simply because they see me as coming from America, coming from Hong Kong, coming from Taiwan, and I see the way they treat mainland Chinese as well, right? So I was like, why is that? So I guess you keep your eyes open, keep your minds open, and observe, and something interesting will come to you, right? So when you go shopping, don't just go shopping. You have to, have your professional eyes open to think about why.
Wow. After hearing from you about that shopping context, I'm jealous about that point. You got a variety of persona. You can change your persona, Western style, Chinese style, Taiwanese, Hong Kong. Okay. When you speak out something different language, you're changing your identity certainly to another stage. Wow.
That's interesting. That's interesting, right?
Yeah.
And also, I tell you, one time, we traveled to Switzerland. I remember we traveled to Switzerland in a small town. I think it was near Interlaken. We traveled to a small town and we were shopping. My husband and me were shopping in a Swiss Army knife store, very famous for Swiss. So we went in and do some shopping and talking to and then so we decided to buy something. And then when we pay, the cashier said, oh, where are you from? And so I didn't really want to go to the long story of, so I said, oh, we're from Hong Kong. And he said, I knew it. And I was like, why? And he said, I know you're not from China because you're polite. I know you're not from Taiwan. I know you're not from Taiwan because your English is good. See, it doesn't matter where you go, people have stereotypes.
Stereotype, okay. Yeah.
Right? People have stereotypes. Yeah. So that's why I'm interested in stereotype research as well. So I guess you just, observe what's happening to you, and that will give you some ideas.
Actually, in order to judge it, your stereotype or our stereotype, which means we need another, additional experience outside of the country. And they, at least at a certain time, we need to expose myself in United States, in Europe, in Hong Kong, in Taiwan. And then we can be able to see the stereotype objectively, whatever.
Or even within your own society, different age groups, different gender, There could be stereotypes,
Okay.
right? So I don't know, is staycation very popular in Korea? Because in Hong Kong, staycation is quite popular. We cannot travel outside. Staycation, a lot of people have, have stereotypes as well. Whether you're a couple, you're a family, what type of hotel you're staying, the way you dress, so it could happen anywhere.
Okay, right. And okay, we still a few moments. Any students question about academia or business or whatever life? No. Okay, Sabina, you're from another country, so you can ask whatever stereotype.
I'm sorry, what? What do you mean?
A stereotype in Korea.
Like stereotype about Koreans? Oh crap.
Stereotype could be positive.
Like I don't think there's so many stereotypes about. I think there's a stereotype that everyone looks like in K-dramas and these kind of things, and also that all Koreans are very smart. Not that they aren't, just people say Asians must be smart. I think that is the most like common stereotype I have heard of. I don't know many stereotypes, to be honest. I don't
actually even among the Asians we have a stereotype each other.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And when I was in UK, one Chinese student came to me and you must be good in math or something, but you're Asian too, so you must be good at math. And he said, I'm not. And I said, I'm not too. So yeah, that happens.
Yeah.
But one thing about the stereotype is that when you think about other country or other regions, you have a stereotype, and when you do the travel, you carry the stereotype with you. So I think that has a lot of potential to research.
Okay, students, you don't have questions? I have. Okay, all of the researchers, including me, highly interested in submitting paper top tier first. Yeah, definitely want to accept in those tiers. But however, the students, they are just starting or beginners researchers. They cannot afford to submitting their paper to the top tiers. So as an advisor, how to advising them to the kind of, the allocated the level of journals. Your case are probably you just starting work for the top tier targeting, I guess. But however, what do you think?
I guess you take a look at the papers published in the journal. You get a sense of what is similar to yours. I understand it's difficult to judge. We all think our papers are great. But try to submit. You don't have to automatically say this is not good and therefore I submit to a not so good journal. You can always aim high. You do the best you can. You aim high. The worst could happen is get rejected, right? Don't take rejection personally. Please don't take it personally. It's not about you. I'm not rejecting you. You're a nice person. I'm rejecting that paper. Okay, so don't take it personally.
Paper is my son.
Yeah. Don't take it personally. And also, the major publishers now have transfer service. For example, if you submit a paper to TM, I don't see it as suitable. The transfer manager will suggest you transfer to other journals. You do accept the transfer, and the worst can happen is you get rejected 2 or 3 times. But at least you try, right? If you don't try, you never know. So with experience, you can judge whether this is suitable for A or B or C. But if you don't have that experience in making that judgment, you just submit it. The worst that can happen is they reject you. And the second worst can happen is they suggest a transfer.
Mm.
Then suggesting a transfer is kind of getting an advice, right? You don't know where else to submit. They make that recommendation. So that's kind of the advice. The other way is to talk to your supervisor. I'm sure your supervisor can make a good, better judgment. And for the initial, I understand a lot of the people now cut their study into smaller pieces. I probably demonstrated how I publish multiple papers out of one study, but for your first project, try not to be too ambitious and try not to cut into too many pieces. You publish one good paper first, right? I think the first experience is really important. If you publish in a nice journal, you will feel very confident. I still remember way back after I published my first paper in Journal of Travel Research, my confidence level went up significantly. I was like, oh, I can do it, right? So once you have that experience, if you cut your paper into small pieces, you cannot publish in top journal, and then your confidence level will not go up, right? So try to do a nice piece and get it published in a good journal. That will help in terms of the future confidence level.
Right. So in terms of a paper linked to the job opportunity in academia. Here in Korea, we are not mainland stream of tourism academia because the Korean students they are smart, but system is not so smart as students' ability. The system is sometimes sucks. Anyway, I want to hear from you. Even though the students in Korea they graduate from in Korea, and yeah, absolutely, the bunch of paper publication in top tiers, they may get a chance in Hong Kong Polytechnic anyway. But however, it takes a long time. So if you such committees members, we are mostly biased person. So anyway, what do you think is comparing you PhD from United States and PhD from Korea, but this paper is better than United States? It's a stupid question, I know that.
No, it's not a stupid question. It's a tough question. Well, depending on what you want to do with your career, not everybody wants to go to a research intensive university, right? Some people prefer teaching. Some people can go to a teaching oriented university. You do a little bit of research, but teaching is your main responsibility. For us, Hong Kong Poly U, we are research intensive, right? So that's different. Just like in the United States, you have a few research intensive university, but the majority are teaching oriented university. So you need to think clearly, what do you like, right? If you do research because you have to, that's gonna be tough. You're probably not gonna be very happy throughout your life. If you do it because you have to do it, right? Then you feel pressure, you feel, but if you really are interested, that's great. So the majority of the university are not research intensive university. If you're happy to be a great teacher, educate the next generation, then yes, doing scholarship is still important, but it's not everything, right? So I guess you need to be clear to yourself, why are you doing research? There are two types of people. One type of people doing research to survive, you have to do it. The other type of people to survive to do research, they wake up every morning because they want to do research, right? So you have to figure out which type are you. Then that will have an impact on what kind of job you will look for. Then that will influence the requirement for your research output, right? So for me to answer that question, for us to hire an assistant professor, definitely we want to see, even though you're a fresh PhD, we want to see publications in top journals already. Okay. but I have to tell you, that's not for everyone. That's not the preference for everyone. For the applicants that we have every year for assistant professor, those coming out of American universities, especially the top research universities like Penn State, Virginia Tech, some of those research focused university, I'm really impressed. I was like, how do they have time? They have only 3 or 4 years of study and they publish like 3 papers in top journals already. And plus in America, if you want to have a scholarship, you have to work 20 hours a week, right? You have to take classes. So I don't know, they probably don't sleep, but I've seen very good PhD graduates. If that's what they're interested in doing, great. Then the tourism discipline in the future is very bright. But let me tell you, not everyone wants to do it. Okay, so you have to be honest. Why do you do research? Is it because you have to, or is it because you want to? And you could be perfectly happy to work at a university that focus on teaching.
Wow, this is the most wise comment for our students. Thank you. Yeah.
Wow, you're welcome. People want to join us, but I tell you, it's not for everyone. I feel really bad for our young colleagues who works really hard.
Yeah, right. Any other question?
Professor,
Okay.
yeah, can I ask you something? Yeah. Okay. I just want to ask you about the competitive edge in this field because, as you mentioned earlier, it's tourism field. It's really interdisciplinary field because it's related to geography or psychology or recently it's computer science. So it's getting hard to do a research in this field because a lot of people who came from another, department. So it's really hard to do research recently. So what do you think about in this field, student who wants to get competitive edge compare with another researchers? So what do you think about we have to learn or we have to develop our skills? That's my question again.
Okay. I mean, you still have advantage over people coming from other discipline. Just using tourism management as an example, we get submission from other disciplines. Sometimes I get submission from, for example, 3 authors. They all from MIS. They all from computer science. They all from GIS, right? So they do research only using tourism as a context, but they don't understand tourism. So the results that they write does not have impact. They don't know what's the implication for tourism policy. They don't know what's the impact on tourism management. Those kinds of paper usually get rejected, unfortunately, right? What's best is when I talk about interdisciplinary research, you have somebody from tourism who can really understand the phenomenon and interpret the results. If you need help from other discipline, then they provide the disciplinary advice. So for us, including us, coming from the tourism discipline, I think if you can learn one additional discipline, that will be really, really helpful. Okay, try not to do everything, right? You have to stay focused. Are you interested in big data? Then you want to learn some programming or machine learning. If you're interested in finding out motivation, psychology, consumer behavior, you may want to pick up I wouldn't call a second major. You can self-learn. You don't have to get a degree. You can get some disciplinary background in psychology, social psychology. If you're interested in forecasting, then you get some disciplinary background in economics. So learn one additional discipline. That will be really, really helpful. But your study in tourism is definitely cannot be replaced by somebody, for example, come a strict computer science background, because they don't understand the phenomenon. Yeah, that context is really important.
Great point. Great point. Okay, we are. It's almost time is up. 2 minutes. In this classroom, we attend the Dean of College of Hotel and Tourism, Professor Chung, attending here. So I'm point out, Professor Dean Chung, where are you? You should say hello to Dr. Cathy Chu. No, he's hiding. He's shy.
Yeah, the thing is shy.
Anyway, one last question from me again. You know, I'm starting Journal of Smart Tourism last year. You're the top, I am a bottom. So give me the advice.
No, you're doing great. I see your posting of the table of contents and all that. Actually, I need to learn that, to post table of contents. I think the journal is gradually making a name for itself, which is great. It's tough, right? There's so many journals out there. It's tough. And I see people are contributing to your journal. So you don't need advice from me. I have an easier job than you.
As a colleague, sometimes make available time and submitting your idea. As a tourism editors, like a young baby journal, and input your idea, and I'm publishing your name on in front. Promise.
You have a good editorial team, right? So that's really good. Yeah.
Okay. I'm always thankful to the Dr. Cathy Chu. She's so busy to doing everything in teaching, researching, and editorship. But even though she is the atmosphere busiest person in the world, but she accepts my request all the time. I'm deeply appreciate her commitment and then promise to join our classroom for our students. One concluding remark from you to our students and wrap it up.
Well, yeah, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure meeting everyone. It's great that you all turn on your camera. I see so many young faces, and which is very, very good, and good questions too. And I have to say, all of your English is very good as well. That's a very useful tool to be able to express your views and ask very intelligent questions. So I have no doubt that your education at Kyunghee University would get you started in a very, very bright career future. So stay focused, right? Stay focused and be true to yourself. So.
Okay, thank you very much.